Good morning, and I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to today's press conference. We are, of course, going to be having a joint press conference, as is visible at this time. I would like to take this opportunity to give an excuse for the leader of the opposition, who is unable to be here at this time, as he is part of the search and rescue. I would also like to hand today's session over to MP Tabitha Sarbo-Hali, who will be taking us through today's proceedings as the chair.
Good morning, members of the media, fellow Guyanese, and everyone joining us live and across the country, maybe across the world as well. Before we formally start, I would like us to take a moment of silence for all whose lives were lost in this horrific tragedy. You may have your seat. Thank you. Before we proceed, I wish to make some things clear so we are all on the same plane. Out of respect for the victims, their families, the survivors, and the ongoing search, rescue, and recovery efforts, our focus today is on this national tragedy, on those who have been affected, on the questions that must be answered, and on the actions that are necessary to ensure that such a tragedy never occurs again. We therefore respectfully ask members of the media to confine their questions to matters relating to the MV Barima tragedy. Should there be questions on unrelated issues, we will be happy to address them at another appropriate opportunity. The organizations represented on this platform here today are those that accepted the invitation to come together in response to this national tragedy. While not every opposition party or movement has chosen to participate in this joint initiative, those of us who are here have done so because we believe that at moments such as these, our foremost responsibility is to the people of Guyana. I wish to acknowledge that the leader of the opposition, as was said by my colleague, General Secretary Odessa Primus, that the leader of the opposition has been unable to join us today. Since Sunday, as you are well aware, he has been on the front lines of the search and rescue effort, working alongside emergency responders, volunteers, and residents in support of the ongoing operation. His absence from this press conference is therefore not one of indifference, but one of service. His immediate priority, like ours, is the welfare of those affected by this tragedy. Today, I have the privilege of sitting alongside representatives from across Guyana's political opposition. Darwin Best, leader of VPAC, is here. Mr. Francis Michael Bailey of VPAC. Mr. David Patterson, former Minister of Public Infrastructure and current acting leader of the Alliance for Change. Mr. Manzo Walton Desir, Member of Parliament and leader of the Forward Guyana Movement. Ms. Janelle Swetna, Member of Parliament We invest in Nationhood with portfolio responsibility for public works. Ms. Dawn Hastings-Williams, Member of Parliament representing WIN. She has portfolio responsibilities for a number of things, but today we're looking at the Amerindian affairs. Ms. Odessa Primus, Member of Parliament, General Secretary of WIN, and I am Tabitha Sarbo-Hali, Chief Whip. We represent different political parties and movements. We may have different philosophies, we may have different priorities, and at times different views on how Guyana should be governed. That is the nature of democracy. But there are moments in the life of a nation when those differences must give way to something greater. This is one of those moments. The tragedy involved in MV Barima has affected families, communities, and our nation as a whole. It has reminded us that when lives are at stake, political differences must become secondary to our shared responsibility to the people of Guyana. Before anything else, we extend our deep condolences to the families and loved ones of all those who lost their lives, to those who continue to wait anxiously for news of their relatives, and to the survivors who have endured an unimaginable ordeal. We also commend the members of the GDF, the Guyana Coast Guard, emergency responders, healthcare professionals, private boat operators, fishermen, volunteers, and ordinary citizens who have responded with extraordinary courage, compassion, and selflessness in the search, rescue, and recovery efforts. Your service has demonstrated the very best of the Guyanese spirit. This tragedy demands more than expressions of sympathy. It demands answers. It demands accountability. And above all, it demands action to ensure that no family ever has to endure such a tragedy again. It is for those reasons that the joint opposition has come together with one united voice. The people of Guyana deserve confidence that every possible lesson will be learned and that every necessary reform will be implemented to safeguard those who travel our rivers and waterways. Above all else, we owe it to those whose lives were lost aboard the MV Barima to ensure that their passing is not simply mourned, but becomes the catalyst for meaningful change that protects future generations. As I indicated earlier, we have deliberately structured today's presentation and press conference to begin where the tragedy begins, with the people. Before we discuss vessels and regulations, investigations, and systems, we must first acknowledge the human cost of this tragedy. The lives that have been lost, the families left grieving, the survivors who continue to recover, and the communities whose lives have been forever changed. To address this aspect of our presentation, I now invite my colleague, Ms. Dawn Hastings-Williams, Member of Parliament, to speak on the human impact of this tragedy and the urgent support that must be provided to those affected. Ms. Dawn Hastings.
Thank you, MP Tabitha. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dawn Hastings-Williams, Member of Parliament representing the Win Party. In the wake of the recent disaster involving MV Barima, which occurred on the 18th of July at approximately 10:30 p.m., our first thoughts and concerns are with the persons affected by this tragedy. At this time, I wish to join my colleague in commending all the immediate responders, emergency responders, all, and more so the leader of the opposition, Mr. Azruddin Mohammed, and his team, who were out there as of day one of this incident. It is unfortunate that we have to mourn the loss of so many lives. It is very unfortunate. Up to this time, we have not known exactly how many passengers boarded the MV Barima due to inaccurate information that we continue to receive from the authorities. It is quite possible that many of them may have been children. As of the reports received on Tuesday, the bodies recovered were 11 female children and 4 male children. That gives us a total of 15. 15 of our babies, our children, lost their lives. This is a clear indication that the maritime rules were breached. This discrepancy suggests that proper passenger registration was not followed, raising serious concerns that compliance with maritime safety requirements and accountability in the event of an emergency was not in place. Let me now express my thoughts from the perspective of an indigenous person. All lives matter. I repeat, all lives matter, irrespective of your ethnicity, where you live, and your economic status. It is basic knowledge that the Barima-Waini region is populated with various ethnicities. It is also public knowledge that many indigenous peoples reside in this region. However, there has never been a comprehensive review of the transportation service by sea, air, or land for the hinterland residents. In the 21st century, our indigenous communities are still forced to travel by river or sea because an airlift from Ogle to Mabaruma, Port Kaituma, or Matthews Ridge, costing 55 to 60,000 Guyana dollars, remains a luxury to most of us, and we cannot afford it in this oil-rich country. This tragedy has brought to light the conditions under which our hinterland residents had to endure traveling for long periods to reach their destination. In the absence of comfortable and adequate seating in the vessel, we have seen passengers slinging their hammocks, spreading cardboards and bed sheets on the floor, which is unacceptable in these modern times. Not too many years after the Madhya Dam fire, which claimed the lives of more than 20 of our indigenous children, this disaster has reopened painful wounds for indigenous communities across Guyana. We are aware that the Tushaus are out here in Georgetown for the National Tushaus Council Conference. I call on our indigenous leaders to demand justice for the families who have lost their loved ones. Men, indigenous men, women, children, or babies. And in no less terms, I ask that the leaders demand for a long-term psychological and trauma support for the survivors and the bereaved families. As indigenous peoples, we are frustrated and tired by how this government continues to treat us as if we do not matter. And we will no longer accept being pushed to the margins of our own land. At this time, I also want to join with the Amerindians People's Association and my colleagues in the joint opposition in calling for the resignation of the Minister of Public Works, Bishop Juan Edghill. It is time for him to go. He has failed us. He has failed the Guyanese, he has failed the indigenous people, and as a whole, he has failed the country. We call on the public to keep the affected families in their thoughts and prayers. Let us stand together, united, as we mourn the loss of our beloved ones. I thank you.
Thank you. If we are unable to come together in the face of such a tragedy, then one must wonder what has to happen for us as Guyanese to work as one. Based on the way things have been happening over the last few days, it has become apparent that we have no plans in place in cases of emergencies, as we would have seen only a few years ago with the Madhya fire, where unfortunately the lives of many children were lost. And it appears as though, even in the face of that tragedy, we haven't taken an opportunity to learn from that as the government. And that is wholly unfortunate. I do believe that in the face of a crisis, and I'm sure as is shared by many of my colleagues here at the table today, we need each other more than ever. And a tragedy of that magnitude and the resources that we have, it calls for all hands on deck. Whether or not I like Darwin best, whether or not I like Darwin or anybody else is outside of the point, we are facing a tragedy, and I believe the onus was on the government to get all of us involved. The leader of the opposition is now out at sea, part of the rescue team, because he made himself part. I don't, at least based on reports, think the government considers him to be part of anything. But I am saying that we should have all been called in immediately to sit at a table, to put our heads together in the midst of all that is happening, to see how best we could work things out. One of the things that in the cases of tragic situations here in this country, whether great or small, I am particularly concerned about is the images and the messages that we see on a regular basis. And there seems to be absolutely no system in place as it relates to psychosocial support. And in some instances where that is available, it is usually available directly to the victims themselves, and in fewer cases to the family. And I think that that is something that I would urge that we revise as a nation. We have so many ministries, and they have opportunities to come into play as well. The Ministry of Culture, in terms of messaging, in terms of, this is a lot of negative that is coming in to people. And so we're being layered on. We would have already had, prior to this tragedy, our existing challenges. And now we have to interface with seeing and hearing of babies being found, of pregnant women being found. And so we're being layered on with additional painful things. The trauma that people have to now interface with has become even more. And in the coming days, it will be even worse, because more bodies are likely to surface, and it becomes even harder for us. And I'm saying that as a people, consideration has to be given to ensure that as a country, we put systems in place to ensure that we protect our people. Because if we are unable to deal with this, if there is a large breakdown in the psyche of people, in their abilities to function normally, then we are going to be running into a bigger problem directly after this problem. And clearly, we have no capacity to deal with these things. It is also important that even as this is a tragedy, we must also, unfortunately, learn as we go and adapt as we go. And so we listened to the Prime Minister saying that, they were checked, the persons who were rescued, they were checked and they were sent home. In that state, after such a tragic event, you send a person home who has just gone through the most, perhaps, traumatic experience they would ever have in their life. To me, that is reckless. And I'm sure to many of you it is. And we have absolutely got to do better when it comes to our people, especially as Guyanese. Unfortunately, growing up, our culture has not necessarily been one that is conscious of a person's psychology, of their emotional state. But as we grow older, as we learn, as we mature, as we become more informed, we would have to revise the way we handle these sorts of situations. I have listened to, I have been in communication with the leader of the opposition, and one of the things that he would have expressed over the last couple of days would be those persons who automatically kick into gear to help. There are some people whose mental state was affected in real time, and we have no system to deal with that, because at Guyanese, we jump into gear to help when something happens. And in most cases, we are ill-equipped to help, but we just would like to assist as best we could. And even in the case of the fishermen who are there on sea working and are helping, it has now opened the door for us to ensure that all of our fisher folk are trained as it relates to psychology and the helping in these situations. It doesn't have to be anything in depth, but at least give them the capacity to be able to deal with those things, one, and two, for us to ensure that we have a support system for those people who are helping. We have private entities who would have had people jump on board to help. We have individuals who've come on board to help. We have opposition parties who have been helping as well. And I'm saying that even in those instances, we need to ensure that psychosocial support is available to them, and perhaps the setting up of hubs in different communities across this country, because this is not a Region 1 problem. This is not a Region 1 tragedy. This is a tragedy that is a Guyanese tragedy. It's a Guyanese problem, and we're all affected, and support should be available through whatever mediums. Outside of calling in to be able to give information, we should also be able to have hotlines that we can call into to seek some degree of support mentally as well. To wrap up what I would have been, I believe that it is extremely important for us to take a step back. Even now, in all that is happening, and really revise what we are doing and where we're doing it. I don't think it's too late to fix all the things that have gone wrong, but for us to really look at how we could best help, how all of us can help, whether it is through messaging that goes out publicly, whether it is if we have people overseas even who are Guyanese and they're psychologists, sociologists, whatever it is that we can bring in to help to reintegrate some of these people, to help to ensure that they have some degree of psychosocial support, for us to look at those avenues as well, because at the end of the day, more importantly, we are all human beings, and will all be affected, and what that effect looks like is not up to us. We do not know, and so I believe that there is need for us to unite in more ways than one. Thank you.
Available to be able to assist in any way that they can virtually as well. I would like us to now move on a little bit to some of the technical elements that has drawn a lot of attention over the last couple of days. So I'm asked if Mr. David Patterson will lead us through this section.
Thank you, Tabitha. Good morning, members of the media, and thank you for being here. I would first like to express our condolences to the families of those who would have tragically passed away, and our prayers. I'd like to express our support to survivors and our congratulations and support to the teams that are now currently undertaking the recovery operation. This morning, I wish to address the serious concerns surrounding the MV Barima, its maintenance history, its operation, and the urgent need to protect the traveling public. The MV Barima was commissioned in 1939 and served this country for many decades, including on routes from West Bank Berbice to Bartica. It is, however, best known for serving the Northwest District. By design, the vessel had an estimated passenger capacity of approximately 150 persons and a cargo capacity of approximately 290 metric tons. For a vessel this age, maintenance is not a routine administrative matter. It is a matter of public safety. From the 1990s until 2020, the general and specific repairs were undertaken by established contractors, including GNIC and Courtney Ben Contracting Services. Because of the age of the vessel, several structural components had to be specifically fabricated overseas by specialist companies. These long-standing arrangements mattered. They helped ensure that the vessel had access to the specialist parts, knowledge, and technical support required to keep an aging vessel operating as safely as possible. After the change in administration, those arrangements were disturbed. Contracts previously awarded to Courtney Ben were withdrawn, and that company was forced into liquidation. GNIC is no longer operational after its dockyard was repossessed by NISIL. As a result, maintenance and servicing of the MV Barima were handed to another company whose primary business was fishing. Let me be clear. This is not a personal attack on any contractor. The real issue is whether the critical link to the specialist fabrication, replacement parts, and proven maintenance systems for a vessel of this age was broken. That question must be examined carefully by independent maritime experts. Records will show that the MV Barima was docked in November 2015 and underwent a comprehensive rehabilitation. That work included new engines, new shaft, new hull works, and upgrades to the cargo and the passenger areas. The vessel returned to full operation in March 2017. It took 18 months to rehabilitate it completely. Between 2017 and 2020, records also indicate that the vessel underwent its required maintenance cycles and was deemed seaworthy up to that period. However, even with those efforts, the administration at that time understood that the remaining effective lifespan of the vessel was limited. This is why, through a grant and loan arrangement provided by the Government of India, designs were advanced for the procurement of a new vessel for the Northwest route. Following an independent tender process, a successful bidder was selected. That award was challenged by the unsuccessful bidder, which necessitated a further review. The subsequent further technical review confirmed that the original decision and contractor was correct, as the vessel proposed by the successful bidder was superior in all aspects. On return to office, the PPP reversed this decision made through the independent process and awarded the contract to the previously unsuccessful bidder. The result was the MV Militia, a vessel which, in our view, is not properly suited for the needs of the Northwest route because of its size and design. At the time, the public was told that the lower bid would allow savings to be used for the construction of new stellings to receive the new vessels. 6 years later, those promised facilities remain incomplete. Port Kaituma Wharf is a clear example of mismanagement. The wharf project was poorly designed was so poorly designed that it required major corrective work. Questions remain about whether adequate preliminary studies were conducted and whether taxpayers were forced to pay the additional cost because of these design flaws. Sounds familiar, sounds almost like a gas ashore, isn't it? To date, the project remains incomplete, and it's now being used as an excuse why the MV Barima had to remain in operation. We must also address the issue of ticketing, passenger control, cargo management, and vessel loading. The problem of persons attempting to travel without official tickets, whether with or without the collusion of staff, is not new. Between 2015 and 2020, independent inspectors were hired directly by the Ministry of the then Public Infrastructure to verify that passengers, cargo, fuel, and related operational matters were properly accounted for and documented. This inspection system was disbanded. The inspectors were removed and, to the best of our knowledge, not replaced with an equivalent system of oversight. Had such a system remained in place, it may have helped prevent unsafe loading practices and other operation failures. Addressing now the ferry operations. Today, we are calling for some urgent actions. First, a full and independent examination of the maintenance, inspection, dry docking and certification records of the Barima, of MV Barima, in accordance with our maritime laws. We have the laws, and Amanza will explain. They are on the statutes. We don't have to do anything special. Second, we're asking and demanding that every passenger vessel in the country's fleet must be inspected to confirm its seaworthiness and suitability for the routes in which they are being used. We're also calling for the immediate modernization of docking facilities, the introduction of a secure and efficient ticketing system, and urgent, credible program to replace aging vessels with a modern ferry fleet supported by upgraded terminals. This is not about one vessel. It's about public safety, accountability, and the rights of citizens in the riverine and hinterland communities to travel with confidence. Our people, the people, deserve answers, and they deserve a transportation system that is safe, modern, reliable, and properly managed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I think he gave us a clear understanding of why we are where we are at this stage. I wouldn't say much because I know a lot of questions will be asked. I will just hand this over now to Mr. Derwin Best for him to make his statement.
Good morning. Good morning to the press and viewers around Guyana and around the world. First, I want to call on each and every one of us, pastors, churchgoers, to pray, not just for the victims, but for Guyana. Today, as we come together as a united opposition, I want to focus on the failures that was publicly displayed by the minister himself. I've seen a lot of call for an independent investigation, but there's also a call for criminal investigation for some admission that was made public. The minister would have admitted publicly that this vessel was due for dry dock. I asked of the press and every right-thinking guy needs to look at that recommendation. In that recommendation, it says the two main turbos needs to be changed. What is the turbo used for? To give the engine power. Why would you, if the captain recommend this ship needs turbo, send that same vessel at sea? Immediately, there should be criminal investigation and charges being laid wherever it should be. Secondly, the minister would have moved a statement publicly on multiple occasions about the loading of the vessel, whether it was overloaded or not. We demand for the minister to public immediately what method is used, not to just load this ship, but all the other ships around Guyana. These ferries are owned and controlled by the state, which means the responsibility falls directly at the feet of the government. What method was used to calculate where the passengers weighed, or the cargoes weighed, or were we using what we call in Guyana average? How can you demonstrate whether that vessel had the required amount of cargo or not? The other admission that the minister made last night, that this vessel was carrying commercial cargo, which was petroleum product. I'm sure you guys missed that. That vessel is not designed to carry fuel. It is designed to carry passengers and dry cargo. How was that cargo stored? Was it stored in a safe manner? Was it highly flammable? That was another disaster waiting to happen. Is this a normal practice? These are admission of the minister himself. Those three right there, I believe, should call for an immediate criminal investigation for the negligence of the people responsible for the 150 lives that we are now sitting here mourning. What we've seen in Guyana today is a pattern of negligence, and it's becoming norm. You go around Guyana, a pothole after a road is built after a year becomes the norm. An unsafe practice where you find 30 children in the norm. Why would you sit there and try to establish there's 150? I just heard the minister said this vessel's capacity is 150. I asked for the minister to demonstrate where they seat or seat in on that vessel for 150 passengers, because none of us have gotten into a plane or any other aircraft and seen people laying on the floor. What are the standard protocol when you load these vessels with public? These are public transportation. This is not a manned private minibus. Thirdly, this is the most important factor where this is concerned. Who was responsible for that vessel, which is supposed to be the crew members? We've all traveled to Port Kaituma. A lot of us would have traveled to the United States. I want to give this to you guys so you understand. And I don't want to use too many shipping terms. Not because a pilot or 17 crew members are on a vessel means they are licensed to maneuver that particular vessel. They have what's called licensing. You can have a pilot license to move a plane from Ogle to Port Kaituma. Does that mean that same pilot can take a 747 from JFK to New York? The minister must publicly share with every Guyanese that those 17 crew members had the required training and they were certified to maneuver that particular vessel. The next question I have for the minister to make public, this has nothing to do with investigation, because this has become a pattern in Guyana where we have normalized unsafe practice. We have normalized corruption. So today is not about politics. We must come together as a people and demand accountability from this government. This is not about politics. The requirement I'm asking, each and every one of those crew members should have undergone some level of safety training. Were that ever done? We ask for those certificates to be published, not just for this vessel, for all the other vessels that are operating. Same for the scales. We must be able to show whether the scale was on board the MV Barima, whether it was on the wharf, whether it was on the forklift, and same when these vessels leave Port Kaituma. How are these cargo loaded onto these vessels, and how are they monitored? Or are we constant? Yes. Next. What was the navigational system that was on this vessel? We are now in 2026. Our information would have led us to believe that this vessel was being operated with line of sight, meaning a man just watch a tree, wait, line up and turn and go. They had absolutely no navigation equipment. on a vessel. Even our phones today, I was able to find my way here today by using my cell phone. The minister must demonstrate if this vessel had any navigational system up to what the minister earlier, former minister spoke to maritime standard. The next call I'm going to make. The minister published, she said, this vessel was due for dry dock. In 2026, they're just waiting for the slot. I'm sure we all heard that. If this vessel was docked in 2024, the average vessel is docked every 3 years. That's maritime, 3 to 5 years. Why is this vessel ready for dock in less than 2 years with a list of deficiency as long as it is? One of the deficiency that you saw is for them to pour cement on the floor. The only time you pour cement on the floor is when there's leakage. This is a recommendation that is on the internet, that is published by the same government. That's a part of the tender. The other thing it spoke to is beams that are unsafe. Now, if all these deficiencies were displayed or was reported by the captain, why was this vessel sent to sea? Why is our indigenous people, is our Guyanese people continue to be treated like third and fourth class citizens when we are now not just Guyana, but an oil-rich Guyana? I hope and I pray that the people of Guyana wake up and come together and unite, because leave your party card at home. This is no longer about politics. This is about survival. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bess. We will now move straight on to Francis, Mr. Francis Bailey, as he gives us his presentation.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. Good morning to the press today. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I'd like to fit myself somewhere between my esteemed colleagues, Ms. Walton Desir and Mr. David Patterson, with a brief exposition on our reasonable expectations of a fair investigation. Now, I think everyone knows by now I would probably sit here and happily speak for 2 hours, so I prepared a statement. So in the interest of efficiency and expediency, we don't have to sit here for too long. But this is what I have to say, and I said I'm fitting myself somewhere between Mr. Patterson and Ms. Walton Desir, because Mr. Patterson would have just started on the topic of what it means to have a full investigation, and I'm sure Mr. Desir will continue with some of the more technical aspects of the maritime law that relate to this particular case. So today we're not here to prejudice the outcome of an investigation. We're here to set out what every Guyanese should expect from one. The sinking of the MV Barima has shaken our nation. Families deserve more condolences. They deserve answers. And these answers must be based on facts, evidence, and independence, not politics and public relations. A credible investigation in Guyana must ask the difficult questions. Was the vessel seaworthy? Were maintenance schedules followed? Was the vessel overloaded? Were safety regulations enforced? Were emergency procedures followed? Did regulatory agencies carry out their responsibilities? And every single possible contributing factor must be examined without fear or favor. Evidence must be preserved immediately. Survivors, crew members, first responders, and witnesses must all be interviewed while the recollections are still fresh. Maintenance records, inspection reports, cargo manifests, communication logs, and all relevant documents should be secured and made available to the investigators. And more importantly, this cannot be an investigation where the government investigates itself behind closed doors. The process must be independent and transparent. It must also include qualified marine experts whose credibility is beyond question. The families and the public deserve regular updates, not rumors and not speculation. And finally, the purpose of this investigation must be bigger than assigning blame. It must identify every failure to occur and produce recommendations that prevent another family from experiencing this pain again. Our expectations are simple. First, we call for the publication of the investigation's terms of reference, the names and qualifications of the investigators, and regular public updates. Second, we demand that the final report be released in full, together with a clear timetable for implementing every safety recommendation. Too often in Guyana, when tragedy occurs, there is a moment of public outrage, there is sadness, grief, and then too often, unfortunately, we go back to being silent and ignoring the problem at our peril. I think I'm joining every single person at this table here today in hoping and in fact demanding that this is a never again moment in our history where never again would we have to open up the newspaper and learn about pregnant women, babies, children, elderly of all races, of all ages and all dispositions meeting their end in such a tragic manner. That should be a stain on the conscience of the nation, and we would do right by each other and the future citizens of this nation to make sure this is the first and last time something like this happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I will now hand us directly to MP Wharton as she gives her presentation.
Thank you, Opposition Chief Whip. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and to Guyanese listening, and indeed those who may be listening from across the world. Our thoughts this morning remain with the families who've lost loved ones, those who are still waiting for, and the survivors who have endured unimaginable trauma. We also are thinking about the members of the Coast Guard, private citizens, the Guyana Defense Force, the Transport and Harbours staff, the fisher folk, volunteers, all of those who are continuing the courageous quest for the recovery of our loved ones. I think nothing that we say today should distract from the human tragedy that has unfolded in our country. But this tragedy, in my view, demands more than condolences. It demands, as has been echoed by my colleagues before me, a fair, independent, and capable, a fair and independent investigation, capable of commanding public confidence. The reality that we're seeing here is that Guyana's development has outpaced its institutional capacity. And unless we build institutions that are equivalent to our growth, more Guyanese will pay with their lives. I think I want to emphasize that whilst we mourn, our responsibility as legislators is not just to mourn, but to ensure that this never happens again. So I want to make and confine my comments this morning, at least these initial comments, on the critical aspects of our legal and regulatory framework that should underpin our government's approach to this matter at this time. Now, every serious marine casualty requires an independent safety investigation. We want to emphasize that that investigation is not about assigning blame. It is about establishing the facts and identifying the safety failures that have allowed the tragedy to occur. It examines every aspect of the occurrence, including the vessel's maintenance history, surveys, certification, inspections, operational management, regulatory oversight, and the actions and decisions that contributed to the casualty. Its purpose is to determine not only what happened, but why it happened, and how do we prevent it from happening again. I want to note here that last evening at the government's press conference, Prime Minister Mark Phillips repeatedly referred to a commission of inquiry. And that reference in and of itself raises an important legal consideration. Which commission of inquiry? Is the government proposing a commission of inquiry established under the Commissions of Inquiry Act? Is it referring to the formal investigation provided for under Part 18 of the Guyana Shipping Act? Or is it referring to the marine safety investigation required under the International Maritime Casualty Investigation Code? And it matters. It matters because these are not interchangeable terms. They are very distinct, separate legal processes with different purposes, different powers, and different legal consequences. Most importantly, the marine safety investigation required by the International Maritime Organization Casualty Investigation Code is not optional. And I want to emphasize that the government does not have a choice. It is not optional. It is a mandatory safety investigation that Guyana is required to conduct following a very serious maritime or marine casualty, because we have signed on and we are signatories to the International Maritime Organization. And I want to be clear that a commission of inquiry cannot replace that investigation. One exists to improve safety. The other examinations or investigations may examine broader questions of public administration, the question of accountability, and culpability. So they cannot be interchanged. Point to note as well is that a commission of inquiry takes considerable time. Meanwhile, evidence is lost, memories fade, and opportunities to establish facts disappear. This is precisely why the legal framework requires that a marine safety investigation begin immediately. I want to be clear that Guyanese have had enough. We've heard enough. We are tired of that there will be no stone left unturned. We are tired of hearing that there will be full and independent investigations, and we've watched commissions of inquiry after commissions of inquiry, and we are frankly exhausted. Before the end of today, it is important that the government of Guyana tell the people of Guyana precisely what legal process it has invoked, under what legal authority it is proceeding, who has been appointed to conduct the mandatory marine safety investigation, and how that investigation will be functionally independent of those whose actions themselves may fall under investigation. Let's be also clear, my Guyanese brothers and sisters, that we do not trust the government. I certainly do not have any confidence in the government to investigate itself. And this is the reason that international law requires an independent safety investigation. Precisely because serious maritime and marine casualties may require investigators to examine the conduct of the regulator itself, the certifying authority, the inspecting authority, and the operator. In this case, where it is a state-owned vessel, where the state itself will become a subject of scrutiny, the investigation must be capable of commanding public confidence. So, as I've said before, the questions may arise, given that this is a state-operated vessel, about maintenance, surveys, certification, inspections, operational management, and regulatory oversight. If those matters are to be investigated, the Guyanese people must have confidence that this investigation is free to go wherever it will lead. Accordingly, it cannot be conducted by the government itself. So I am calling for the government to identify the legal framework. And I began by referencing the point that I think one of the most important lessons from this tragedy is that we have outgrown our institutional arrangements. We have to come to grips with the reality that we are not any longer a poor country, but we, and a small country with modest transport systems. According to the statistics, we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world. We have expanded aviation, maritime transport, etc. We've seen the roads open, we've seen the ribbons cut, we've seen the vessels being commissioned, and there is talk now about rail. Yet, our accident investigation capability has not kept pace. Around the world, countries establish permanent independent transportation safety investigation boards and authorities. The United States, for example, has the National Transport Safety Board. Canada has the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. These are independent bodies whose sole purpose is to investigate transportation accidents, preserve evidence, identify causes, and make safety recommendations. They do not exist to assign blame, they exist to prevent the next tragedy. I strongly recommend, and I want to say unequivocally, that it is time that Guyana moves in that direction. And this is a recommendation that I had made some time ago when I worked in the Ministry of Public Works, as it then was, in the mid-2000s, that rather than maintaining separate, fragmented arrangements for example, aviation accident investigation and maritime accident investigation, that we should, under Parliament, establish a single independent transportation safety investigation board. The existing accident investigation authority that exists within the maritime sector could be subsumed and consolidated, and it will become a part of the board alongside marine investigators, and as our transport network evolves, investigators with responsibility for roads, bridge, and rail accidents. Such a board would have a permanent investigators, specialist expertise, statutory powers to secure accident sites, preserve evidence, obtain operational and maintenance records, conduct technical examinations, and issue independent safety recommendations. It would be activated immediately when a serious accident occurs without waiting for ad hoc arrangements to be assembled. I want to wrap up by indicating that the tragedy of the MV Barima demonstrates why this is necessary. Because while rescue and recovery operations must always remain the first priority, the preservation of evidence cannot wait. Every hour that passes risks the loss of critical information that may explain not only what happened, but how to prevent it from happening again. I think that the tragedy here is that our public expenditure is outpacing the capacity of our institutions to regulate, supervise, and protect our public. And I will end by reminding us that when our institutions and our institutional arrangements fail to keep pace with the development of the country and the fastest growing economy and trillion-dollar budgets, it is the poor and ordinary Guyanese that always bears the cost. And as the MV Barima so very clearly shows us, that sometimes we bear the cost with our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Walton. I will just move directly to MP Janelle for her to give her presentation. She's also responsible for the Public Works portfolio from the Reinvest in Nationhood.
Good morning, Guyanese, our viewers around the world. Today, I join at this table those who you've elected to be your voice. And if we cannot be your voice, then we have failed you. My task today requires no script. My colleagues here, they've laid the foundation on every aspect as it relates to this tragedy. There are no words to express what we are feeling in our... It is one thing to throw cement on a crack. It is another to fill a hole with asphalt. But who fills the hole in the hearts of the people of Guyana? Who fills the hole in persons' beds right now that are empty? Who fills the hole in the arms of the mother that is crying for her baby? Who is filling the hole for the brother, the sister, the aunt, the uncle, the daughter that is crying for her father and uncle that cannot be found in the waters? One life lost is one too many. All great leaders echo that. Over all the centuries, one life lost is one too many. Guyana, we have over 100+ persons. And we are here to speak for you. We join together to speak for you. We cannot be silent on this. This is the highest level of incompetence. And to fix this is only one way. The PPP dictatorship administration must go. And we first must start with a minister responsible for the Ministry of Public Works. Minister Juan Edghill, who is throwing blame on everyone's feet except his own. And as a people, and as the elective body, we cannot sit and be silent. We join together and call for the immediate resignation of Minister Juan Edghill, Minister of Public Works. I have spoken about his incompetence in Parliament at the beginning of the budget debate. I've laid the foundation of all the failed projects, beginning with roads. He can cover a hole in a road, but no one can cover a hole in the hearts of the people and the families that are crying. The bodies that are floating up, those that are decomposing in the containers. What is the legacy that is being left? What are all the viewers of the world seeing here? We mourn, we cry, but we will not be silent. The responsibility of this tragedy lies at the feet of Minister Juan Edghill. And he must be removed from office. VP Barima, he said that all those who are responsible for this tragedy will suffer the consequences. It must begin with a minister who has the portfolio for the Ministry of Public Works. And we're calling on his removal, his resignation immediately. The people of this country cannot wait. We must speak out. We must be held accountable. The responsibility falls at his feet. It is not on the cannabis. It is not on the tide. It is not on the sailors. It is not on the cargo. It is not on the age of the vessel. But by now, you should have gotten rid of that vessel. That vessel is over 80 years old. And to fix this problem, the PPP administration must go immediately. We have no confidence in you. None. Our people are dying. Trucks are going backwards on the bridge. People are dying. Fires are following ministers. The entire cabinet needs to be sent home, and the PPP administration needs to go immediately. And I speak as an elected member of Parliament, the voice for the people, and I join all the colleagues here at the table. You've elected us, and we speak for you. We speak for you. The PPP administration must go immediately. Let it be clear The responsibility of this tragedy lies solely at the feet of Minister Juan Edghill and the PPP dictatorial administration. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Janelle. It is such a sober moment because she spoke from her heart and she spoke what all of us here feel. We up here, we're trying our best to compose ourselves. It has not been easy. It is not easy. Some of us may have families, some of us may not, but they're all children of Guyana. Before we conclude, allow me to leave the people of Guyana with this message as we open up for questions. Today, the joint opposition has spoken with one voice. We have honored victims, we have stood in solidarity with the survivors and their families. We have outlined the serious questions that must be answered, the reforms that must be pursued, and the actions that are necessary to restore public confidence in the safety of our nation's waterways. There must be truly an independent investigation, free from political influence and supported by the expertise necessary to establish the full truth of what occurred. We call for complete transparency throughout that process. We call for every piece of evidence to be preserved, for every witness to be heard, and for every recommendation to be implemented. We call upon the government of Guyana to place the welfare of the victims and their families above all other considerations by ensuring that they receive the medical care, the psychological support, the financial assistance, and compassionate engagement they deserve during this difficult time. We also recognize that tragedies of this magnitude are of concern not only to Guyana, but to all who value human life, good governance, and public safety. Accordingly, we respectfully call upon the diplomatic community and our international partners, including the United States Embassy, the British High Commission, the High Commission of Canada, the delegation of the European Union, the United Nations, and the Organization of American States, the CARICOM Secretariat, and other diplomatic missions accredited to Guyana, to continue encouraging transparency, accountability, and adherence to internationally accepted standards throughout this process. We also urge them, where appropriate, to support efforts that strengthen humanitarian assistance, maritime safety, institutional capacity, and the rights and welfare of the victims, survivors, and their families. And I think I can echo the sentiments of all here, that this tragedy has to be at the foot of the Minister of Public Works and the PPP government. The measure of a nation is not simply how it responds in moments of celebration, but how it responds in moments of tragedy. Let this not become another incident that fades from public memory without meaningful change. Let it instead become the moment when Guyana resolved that every life matters, every family deserves answers, and every person who boards a public vessel is entitled to expect that they will return home safely. To the families who are grieving, we say this: you are not alone. We stand with you. We will continue to seek the truth, to advocate for justice, and to work towards the reforms necessary to ensure that no other family experience such a loss. May the souls of those who perished rest in eternal peace, and may their memory guide us towards building a safer, more accountable, and more compassionate Guyana. At this time, we will be pleased to take your questions, which we respectfully ask be confined to matters relating to the MV Barima tragedy. Kiskadi?
Good afternoon. Could you say off the bat why or what response was given by APNU as to their absence here today?
We would like to keep the press conference on the MV Barima. At the beginning of the press conference, I stated that all those are here, those who accepted, and we'd like to keep it at that for now. Thank you.
Concerning, there was some concerns about the Commission of Inquiry into the Madhya, what happened at Madhya, that it was not good enough and so on. MP Walton mentioned she doesn't trust the government to investigate itself and so on. Whom do you believe should head this Commission of Inquiry? And should we be looking overseas, in the region? What are your suggestions for this inquiry?
I want to be clear that there has to be more than one investigation. Because like I said in my statement, that different investigations will serve a different purpose. The investigation, the marine safety investigation that we will do under the legal obligations that we have to the International Maritime Organization, going out of the Safety of Life Convention, requires a safety investigation to be done. It is my strong recommendation that this government call on our international partners, as the President so loves to say. I think calling on them now is appropriate to lend to Guyana the particular technical expertise that will be needed here. This is not uncommon. We do it all the time when there are aviation accidents. We activate a safety investigation because of, for example, the various components involved in the aircraft, the manufacturer, the engine, etc. We call on technical expertise from the various companies and as well as organizations like the NTSB, Transport Canada, with one request from the government of Guyana. I am sure that those agencies will respond positively. So that is one investigation. And like I said, that investigation is not to apportion blame or liability. It is to learn what the problems were and how do we stop this from happening again. And then there could be a commission of inquiry under the Commissions of Inquiry Act. I truly believe that it should not be anyone in any way, shape, or form associated or affiliated with the government. I believe it is time that we draw expertise from the international community to give Guyanese some sense of hope that there will be some impartiality. It's a tall task because, like I said, we don't trust this government. And then, of course, there may be criminal proceedings flowing out of it. So this is why it's important that you have institutional arrangements and people in positions that understand what has to happen, because it is obvious that they don't. I want to make one further point, and I will close there. I find it odious that given all of the calls for Juan Edghill's resignation, that the government is still callous enough to have him sitting at press conferences and in the face of Guyanese people. It is unconscionable, and it says very clearly that this government really doesn't care about how traumatized we are. They do not care. By now, at a bare minimum, he should not be even publicly speaking on any of these matters, but we have to endure him, press conference after press conference, trying to score political points about what they did and what they did not do. Now is not the time for that. He must sit down and he must be quiet.
If I can go again, there will be like of the people who died given the issues with the captain and the crew and the manifest and so on. how does the opposition expect that to be addressed? Even for the people who were just injured or who had to be underwater for a long time.
It's on? Yeah. The issues of liability will flow directly to the state. This was a state-owned vessel. And state-owned vessels, vehicles, etc., are usually not insured. That is because the state underwrites any liability that could occur. So the state will be liable. And then you have the Madhya Dam fire as a blueprint about what the families should not do. Because you had a certain person who is now a minister that caused the family to sign undertakings waiving their legal rights for $5 million. And so immediately, and I think that this is something that the opposition may be able to assist with, is to assemble a battery of lawyers to provide legal advice to those persons, to the families, because this could very well end up in something like a class action lawsuit if the government is unable to come to some kind of proper settlement of this matter for families. I mean, there's a little girl that has lost her mother, her father, her sister, her brother. How are we ensuring her welfare, that she goes to school? And so I think a strong legal team has to be assembled to make sure that these families do not fall through the cracks. I am aware that emissaries of the government are already approaching victims' families. And so, of course, while you can't compel anybody to do anything in terms of what they want to accept or don't accept, I would strongly recommend that a battery of lawyers be assembled to really give some legal aid to the family members and the survivors of this tragedy.
Last question from me.
Just to add to what the MP would have shared in terms of us having had a similar, well, not similar, but having had a tragedy in the past, I would have noted as well my colleagues here from VPAC making a call even on social media for persons to avoid signing any form of documents at this time where, you know, people may not necessarily be in the best state of mind, they're grieving and these sorts of things, and they may be approached to do same. It is at this point that we have got to remain extremely guarded. Additionally, in my conversation with the leader in terms of what we should share as it relates to his willingness and commitment as well to helping, whether it is with the legal fees, to ensure that those persons, those victims, are given what they should be given, even though that may not necessarily look at like a particular figure, because currently the matter that was referenced by my MP before would have stated that the people from the Madhya fire, well, some of them unfortunately were made to sign that document, and those who did not sign those documents to date are in court being fought by the state with a series of high-profile lawyers. And so it's not necessarily going to be a walk in the park in as much as we are saying that this is a heartbreaking situation. As we have said with the Madhya situation, the government still found it, I don't want to say in their heart because there is no demonstration of same, but they still found the courage to fight those poor indigenous families with some of the biggest lawyers that they have. And to the best of my knowledge, some of them are not even from Guyana, that make up that panel there. Pardon? That makes up the team, yes. And so that is wholly unfortunate, but I would like to boldly say even though the leader of the opposition has indicated his willingness, that all of us are willing. I'm sure that the AFC, they have some lawyers. MP Amanzas also may not be practicing, but also a lawyer and able to assist. So I'm almost certain that as a collective, we are able to pool our resources and energies to help those families as it relates to getting some sort of legal help so that they could make the best decisions going forward.
Thank you. And just one last question from me. Mr. Patterson, you mentioned all of the efforts the Acton government would have made in having that vessel in a pristine state by 2020. The government is saying, though, that the last time it was serviced was in 2024. So based on your knowledge and your experience in the field, how did we get from it being maintained in 2024 to what has just happened?
Hello? Yes. Maintenance of these vessels are quite regular. What I try to outline is that you can't just pull up to any dry dock, put on a coat of paint, fumigate it and say and put it back out onto the river, onto the ocean, and say that it has been maintained and it has been seaworthy. I try to highlight without be very specific. The shafts, the drive shafts, I could remember that particularly, the drive shafts for the propulsion system. Not the engine, I'm talking about the propellers and those things like that. They had to be specially fabricated in Europe, in a fabrication, old fabrication yard in Europe. So you can go and carry it into dry dock and a guy sprays it, sandblasts it, and obviously, and it looks nice and new when you send it back out, but the metal fatigue still remains because you haven't done a good job. So, I was trying to highlight that for 30 years before, there were certain companies that always wanted to bid. Actually, no one, it was a two-horse race for 30 years. And everyone knows, and every bidder knew why, because they had established linkages with specialist fabrication yards. So we gained no confidence in the government saying that they dry dock or they did rehabilitation work in 2024, what they should do, and they should actually sit down and start telling you what they did and well, we know who did it. What exactly they've done. Because a boat, the integrity of a boat is not the visual areas in which you see. That is exactly what has transpired here. So therefore, you can have a lovely coat of paint, but it's leaking on the inside. Reports are that the vessel was taken in water. That's what the passengers are saying, the vessel is taken in water, which shows that there's some damage to the structure integrity of the hull. Those are the issues at which they have to address, and as I said, a full comprehensive review will address that.
There is a question on the Zoom link. So we'll start off with Iva. Would you to hear from there?
Yes, good morning. My first question is, given the right to life carries a state obligation to protect citizens through adequate safety regulation, do you believe this tragedy reflects a systemic human rights failure in maritime oversight and not just an isolated incident? And my other question is to Mr. Patterson. My concern is the seating capacity in relation to the MV Barima, 150 to almost 400. Will you be able to explain to us how is the capacity of a vessel really determined?
It could Testing. In response to Ms. Wharton's question about the right to life, it is entirely possible that it could. You see, again, this is where you have to emphasize the importance of institutions, institutional arrangements, legal frameworks. These are very boring issues. They're not sexy at all. But these are the underpinnings of the safety, the dignity, and the right to life of our citizens. And so it could very well be, and I do not want to prejudice any inquiry, so I will not even try to lead them down that line, but it could very well be that a commission could find that the actions or the failures or the lapses were so egregious that they constitute a flagrant violation of regard for the life of Guyanese citizens.
Albert, thank you very much for that question. The maximum capacity, not passenger, maximum load that a vessel can take is determined by its size, its length, width, depth, draft, etc. So, and it's a finite number. But what is done, in the old days, slave ships, the slavers didn't carry any cargo, so you could have said they most willingly could carry 600 persons, not passengers, 600 persons, because they carried no cargo. In the modern era, if you have a cargo vessel as well as a passenger vessel, there's specific computations. There's a hull, which is the area, the storage area below deck. Once you've established the hull, you say, oh, that is for cargo, and then you compute what the weight distribution is left. In the case of the MV Barima, and I challenge Marad, because if Marad is going to get up and say that they have 394, I challenge him that. Whatever the number they have, Marad had to be delinquent. If the director of Marad is saying that his calculation that there's 374 passengers, then he has allowed a vessel to travel with less than 374 life jackets. You think about that. If you have passengers and you say that I am certifying this vessel for 374 persons, you must have at least 400 life jackets, right? So that's where this story becomes to unravel. What they're trying to be clever to protect Edghill incompetence is trying to say that, all right, if you have less cargo, we can carry more passengers. It does not certified for a fixed finite amount. So therefore, 1/5 is Barima. On the MV Barima, I know for sure in 2017, the document says there are 200 adult life jackets, because it's 150 passengers and crew, but you actually cater extra, and 25, I think, children life jackets, because it was certified for that. The new vessel which they procured, MV Malaysia, is 274 passengers, and it's 3 times the size of Barima. They're just trying to say that yes, if you have no cargo, 374 passengers can when you cumulatively add up the weight, can be on the vessel, but it's certified for 150. And that's how you certify. You certify it, you calculate the finite number of passengers that you certify for, plus the load, and that's the limit. So, but I do want maybe Ms. Wharton, you can ask the director, because I'm sure they'll be on there this evening again, that if the vessel, as Edghill has said, and based on his sliding scale, which is that the less cargo you can have more passengers, what is the MARA's computation of the passengers that should have been on the vessel? Because Edghill said the vessel had 268 metric tons of cargo. So how many passengers has he calculated based on his sliding scale that the vessel could safely accommodate? And ask him who makes that calculation, because you can't put that back on the captain. He's not a mathematician, right? He's not the man that's supposed to decide, listen to me, you put in a pound of potato, I got to throw off a passenger. Mara, that is why we set a definitive level. But ask them to give, because they're trying to be clever, they're trying to deceive the people. I would ask you to ask them today. So therefore, if the Barima had 268 metric tons of cargo, how many passengers would you have certified today? And you would hear the fancy dance. And then he comes as though, you know, I mean, there's only a few times that I hear things that Jack Dio say, and I said to myself, you know, maybe he has the, they really think we're stupid. You know what I mean? These are things you can go on chat GBT now. And find out, you know what I mean? He is talking about steel, thinner steel and those things like that. I mean, any mariner would tell you, I mean, the buoyancy is not the steel, it's the volume, I mean, it's the volume that the vessel displaced. You know what I mean? They're just throwing out things because they're desperate and they hope that the Guyanese public could be distracted. Never. And I will say this, Ivor, that when Edghill said 390 something, former members of the Transport and Harbours and Married contacted me and asked where did he get that figure from. And there are people that have been in the Transport and Harbour 35 years. One guy, I mean, I thought he probably would have grown up there, you know what I mean? He's a former, well, I won't call his destination, very senior. He's been there for over 40 years, and he said, oh, impossible, never. MV Barima was always 150. Where are they getting these numbers for? MV Kimbia, which is twice the size, is just about 300 passengers. So don't be deceived. They're floundering, and they're trying to deflect, and they're trying to mislead the public. But you are on the right track if you just keep their feet to the coals and asking these questions.
Minister, I'll come to your defense. If we are to go with the, former minister, sorry. Exactly. If we are to go with the formula that you just used, then we are then agreeing that these passengers would have then been cargo. Because what we just saw is the vessel that would have probably had passengers were only able to seat some of them. So if we are to go with that formula that you are trying to justify, where was the seating for this? Then you point to something very interesting. Let the government publish the certificate. We don't change numbers of passengers overnight. When the vessel was certified, it had to have been certified for a particular number of passengers. We call on the minister to publish the certificate. And not only the certificate, who were the surveyor? Because you can't have a surveyor that's licensed to survey a fishing boat, surveying a passenger boat. We must see the certification also of the surveyor, because maybe that surveyor tell them, we ain't get enough cargo, pack them people in the hole. And that's my response to that. And to answer the question that you asked earlier, on the last dry dock, to back him up, there had to have been a survey before that vessel went into dry dock. The reason they take it in the dry dock, they take it out of water so they can do everything. I am not coming to the defense of Mr. Patterson, but I'm just saying, if the vessel was out of water and it was surveyed, that surveyor should have identified all the deficiency. He don't get to say, I'm going to leave the ones that the new government left and then just fix the ones that, because there's no such thing. When the vessel was placed on dry dock, whatever the deficiency was in 2024 should have been corrected. And the fact that we're going back less than 2 years, it is clear that we maybe just changed 2 plates, put some paint, and put the boat back in the water. And I'm going back to say this again. Their own survey report that they just published shows deficiency that vessel is not seaworthy.
There is another question on Zoom. Anthony Day?
Yeah, pleasant good afternoon to everyone present at the table. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I have a question directed to Ms. Amanzo Wharton. Is there any other person that is present at the table? Last evening, the Prime Minister would have, quote unquote, referred to opposition elements trying to politicize the situation, and he said that the calls for the Minister Edghill to step down What are your thoughts or response to these statements made by the Prime Minister?
Look, I'm trying to keep it civil. The Prime Minister, unfortunately, has to dance to the tune that his controllers are playing, eh? And I believe that the instruction has been given to do everything to make sure that we don't look bad. Circle the wagons, thanks David, as it were. For you not to understand as a leader that this is a national tragedy that requires a national response, and that, frankly speaking, and this is probably why we need to have civic education, that the government consists of the legislature, of which the opposition is a part, then it means that you shouldn't be leading this country. Because at a time when you should be using every resource that you have nationally, at a time when people like David Patterson should be at the table to bring institutional memory to bear, you have time to talk about opposition elements and about who's not running the search and rescue, etc. It is a level of pettiness that this government continues to have that has us in the place that we are now, where we got 100 of our Guyanese brothers and sisters and children and babies at the bottom of the ocean, and we can't get. They have a lack of focus that is appalling. They're focusing on the very, very wrong things. So you know, I pity him, really. It is unfortunate, but I think it is a good indication to the people of Guyana that elections have consequences, and they will know what to do when the next election comes around. On the point of the last point that you made about politicizing it, I think that the government has an inability to distinguish between accountability and politicizing. For them, they would prefer that you not speak of it. Well, as indicated by our presence here today, we're not having it. And really and truly, we really have lost confidence in this government. We've lost confidence in anything that they will say. And I want to encourage you, the media, to keep your foot on their necks, keep their feet to the fire, because the people of Guyana deserve the truth. And the truth has to go wherever it will lead. I trust that that answers your question, Mr. Day.
Thank you. To answer the question, quite frankly, listening to the Prime Minister say that these calls by not just the opposition, because to the best of my memory, the person did say that persons from the general public did call, as well as opposition parties calling for Bishop Edghill to resign. And he said it was noise. It's ironic that he said that he has no problem with democracy somewhere along the line in that same statement. And what I thought it was is disrespectful. It came off as though the Prime Minister is disconnected from the realities of what is happening in this country. And that same disconnect with the reality that we face as Guyanese is also shared by the Minister, who was silently sitting next to him, Bishop Edghill, with a smirk on his face. I think that is also shared in the language and the tone in which he has been speaking, and in some instances almost shouting in the faces of Guyanese during a time like this. At a time like this, he could not contain himself. I don't know. I don't want to go there, but it is sad and it is wholly unfortunate that we have this level of ignorance being displayed at such a level. And again, to reinforce the point that at such a time like this, as it relates to the politicizing of this tragedy, it is a strategy that I believe is being used by the government to silence anybody who is not them. And so you hear, regardless of what you come out and say, the opposition leader goes out into the waters there. He's politicizing the thing. APNO people go out and they have a vigil. Oh, they're politicizing. Somebody else goes and they do something else politicizing. So really and truly, that should stop us from doing anything at all and allow the government to function in this ignorant manner that they have been functioning in. And we're not going to have it. We are not going to sit by. We're not going to be bullied by this government, regardless of who it is. And to reiterate what was said earlier, as I think it is very important, at this juncture, when we are in this emotional, fragile state as a country, I think we should not be seeing Bishop Edghill at all, or the Prime Minister at this point. They have done sufficient damage to an already wounded Guyanese society, and they need to step back, to step aside, and to allow someone else to take the front. We have not heard anything at all from the President. We have seen that he's back in the country. He has not even addressed us. And that too is a reiteration of the disrespect that we have seen by both the Prime Minister and Minister Juan Edghill.
Thank you. I'd not only like to call on the President of Guyana to remove his mask when he's addressing the nation. I saw him stood next to two police officers who were themselves unmasked. And I've just seen him in masks and the gloves since he's returned. But let's speak to this issue of politicization of this issue. I'm sad to report, but this is an intensely political issue. From the time you have a vessel that is managed and administered by the state, that is 87 years old, that is traversing a route with passengers, paying passengers, mothers, children, we've gone through the list. It is a political matter because it's the state's responsibility to not only set up the regulatory environment and framework within which that vessel operates, but to adhere to safety protocols, to make sure that everything is done in a proper manner so when people board a vessel, they can get off the vessel at their destination. That if an emergency or something should happen as they're traversing the route, there would be an AIS device on the ship to enable us to find it. All the necessary protocols they would have, as Mr. Patterson says, they would have an overabundance of life jackets based on the calculation of the number of persons that can fit on the vessel. And it would not arbitrarily change from 150 to 390, because I'm sure any of us that came here today in a car would not expect to go outside and see what we knew was a seating capacity for 5 turn into 15 just because someone gave it another number. And a boat is not a minibus. And this is why I said that is because this is a cultural problem. So it's not a matter of us trying to politicize it. It's a matter of us trying to bring attention to something that's a systemic problem and has persisted for many years. Corruption kills, and we can finally see that corruption kills. It should not have gotten to this point, but our poor safety culture has persisted for long enough that we waited until such a great tragedy brought our attention to it. But this has been a political issue for many years. It's been a political issue since people were complaining about overcrowding on the minibuses and other forms of transport. It is very much a political issue, and we will not shy away from that fact. And I would hope that the politicians that are currently gaslighting the nation reconsider their position. There's a duty of care to every human soul on board of that vessel, and they have been failed. I feel like we are much farther from the answers and the truth that we seek with every moment. We seek to escape responsibility and blame shift and find the nearest poor working class person that we can shift the blame onto. It stops us from taking institutional level of accountability so we can fix the situation, so we can have that never again moment that we were all hoping for. And it's very discouraging to see politicians, especially as Ms. Prima said, persons like Juan Edghill that have already traumatized this nation, coming to gaslight us on top of it. I mean, I would like to see the end of that.
Francis, while I'm stealing the mic from you because it's still VPAC's mic, we got to ask the tough question and the elephant in the room. Why is this only for the indigenous people? We are in the 21st century, and the only vessel that's 80 years old is being dedicated to the people of Region 1, which is predominantly the indigenous people. Enough is enough.
One final word, and then we get another question.
Yes, please permit me. I want to ask one question, but also leave a lingering thought. Where is strongman Barra Edghill at the moment? He's never taken an approach in all of politics to be in the back seat and allow ministers and other government officials to be in the front line. He is taking a back seat, and it's a strategic back seat. Reports coming that the president was in Region 2, and while he was in Region 2, he was in a corner crying. Because when he turned up there, persons were all crying and alone. But I believe it was a strategic plan to leave President Ali to waddle in his own failure, so that he can be seen by this nation that his cabinet is a failure.
Question? The Kaitri News, just a sec. Oh, Delon? Okay.
Marvin K2, Nightly News.
Oh.
I am going to request one person from each political party represented here answer this question, but I would like to start with Mr. Patterson. Given that you were the minister responsible when Fly Jamaica crashed, which could be considered a mass event, as a former minister of the sector, let's say this issue, approach it being the subject minister.
Oh, absolutely differently. First and foremost, you have to be respectful. And when I say be respectful, less than 12 hours after the unfortunate incident, there's a TikTok video of Edghill getting up. The vessel was not overloaded. This is, I want to stop you, and he's there at the top of his voice, literally berating the feelings, the eyesights, the memories of the survivors. Every single survivor that came, that you interviewed, said that the vessel was overloaded. And these are not persons like me and you. I mean, if I jump on, I've traveled on it once. Not Barima, Kimbia, going up to the northwest. But these persons travel every single month, year. So they would know just by eyeballing if it's got more people than normal. Eh? So first thing you have to do is respectful. Second thing you have to do is remorseful. I mean, you have to empathize with people. They immediately said out that any comments negative to or to his stewardship, it's a political statement. You should never do that. And then you have to let the institutions work. We have, as I was highlighting, we have standards with which we signed on to. Because when the Flight Jamaica incident, there's an established protocol. Accident investigation unit kicks in, and they step aside from GCAA because they have to proceed independently. We have established protocols. By now, it's supposed to have kicked in. The preservation of evidence and those things are supposed to kick in. You're not supposed to. First, I understand people saying that the captain was tested positive for drugs and those things like that. You know, that was the first thing that Edghill threw out to deflect. The rest of the two people, you know what I mean? Because, like, you know what I mean, like a man on drugs, so therefore he overturned the boat, and then he's throwing red meat to his supporters for them to devour rather than being professional. You know what I mean? So they arrest the entire management team, the traffic officer, the traffic manager, the store supervisor, the loading manager. However, they've done nothing, but the complaints have been that the ministry themselves had generators, ATVs, and those things like that. He's done nothing to the engineer or his PS, who would have said, let's rang them up and said, look, I need to get these things up because if you don't do it, the usual thing, if you don't cooperate, then you're anti-developmental. You know what I mean? So it's a question of following your established norms. And then finally, I want to make a statement on search and rescue. We all knew that Mark Phillips was clueless. We all knew that. You know what I mean? No, come on. We all knew. He's an affable fellow. You meet him and you speak to him and he's affable and so. However, when they came in, at the advent of oil and gas, search and rescue, and a man here who can speak more on this, search and rescue became a paramount importance in this country. Our offshore oil finds and productions, they're all offshore. If there's a disaster, God forbid, let's use this area as a blueprint for what would happen if one of those SPSOs got into any danger. You could see it out that they're dead because these guys got helicopters, can't fly. The Coast Guard boats don't even know what they're doing. So, but the search and rescue, which was supposed to be an independent body in every other country under this Coast Guard, is an independent body. They move it under the CDC, which is the Civil Defense Commission, who are a coordinating agency that handles hampers. Right? No, you may smile, but when you sit down and think about it, I mean, and they're talking about, oh, this and this, the CDC is civil, and when there's a flood, they're there. They have no capacity to do this search and rescue. It's a delegated thing. That's under every other country is under this Coast Guard. And they have established units, established protocol. No, it's under the Prime Minister, so that he gets $6 billion a year, and he never counts for it, and he uses it for political propaganda. But he is clueless. But you mean, I say one eye man is king and blind eye man country. So he's looking good now, right? But it's a series of clueless persons. But we would have done it totally different. Because, of course, we had our search and rescue, there was a search and rescue policy and establishment in progress in 2020. That would have been up and running. The protocols would have been established and the technical work would have kicked in immediately. Thank you.
Sorry, what was your question?
If you were in the minister's position, let's say this issue faced you, how would you approach it being the subject minister?
I would have offered to the president my resignation. It's really that simple. I think this matter has been handled poorly from the top down, from the president come down. Look at when the president spoke. By the time the president addressed this nation, a couple of things had already happened. Juan Edghill had already, in the most bellicose manner, said to the nation, the vessel was not overloaded. That was the early morning. Right? By the time the president spoke to this nation, they had started to reverse the position, because I think he came in the next day and he addressed the next day. By that evening, by the evening of Sunday, they had started to reverse the position and saying, oh, the vessel was overloaded, the manifest was fraudulent, and we had more than we had. But the captain had cannabis. So as a president of a nation that is possibly facing the most grave catastrophe my nation has ever faced, with hundreds of Guyanese possibly dead at the bottom of the ocean, one would have thought that Irfan Ali's approach would have been different. For me, what should have been done is that as president, he should have immediately required that the minister, the head of the Maritime Administration, the head of the Transport and Harbours Division, proceed on leave to facilitate a full and independent and impartial investigation. I would have said that to the nation. At least my people are aware that, listen to me, I am not about to stand nonsense in this. There's too much happening here, and we've got to get to the truth of this, because this can't be allowed to happen again. Instead, what you see is an instinctive circling of the wagon, and you come in to tell us empty words that we have already experienced the day before when you were not even in the country. And so the fact that he was not even there the day, one would have expected that he would come and say to this nation, I've asked the minister, the head of MARAD, who's the regulator, the head of the Transport and Harbours Department, who's the operator, to proceed on leave to facilitate an investigation. Then he should have announced, as the president, maybe a task force comprising, I would say, members of 3 government MPs, 3 opposition MPs, private sector persons, indigenous representatives, maybe the human rights organization and another civil society organization that will report to me as the president on all things MV Barima. And then I would have called immediately on my international partners to say, look, NTSB, we need your help. We don't have the expertise here. We need to begin immediately to secure an independent and impartial investigation, because I cannot afford to lose 130 Guyanese lives again. And that should have been the statement that one would have expected from Mayor Fanali. Instead, we get platitudes. We get, oh, no stone unturned, no, we must love, and yes, we love you, but we want the truth as well. The two are not mutually exclusive. So I think that that is how I would have approached it.
My response is a quick one, and MP Tabitha can hear me out. When she asked if I would speak on the win, from the win aspect, I said there's one sentence I would say, and MP Amanza echoed it. I would resign. And I would quote this here that I have written in my script. Ministerial responsibility means accepting responsibility not only when systems succeed, but when systems fail. And that is what I would have done if I were in Minister Edghill's position. And also, I would have removed the title Bishop from my name.
Okay, I'll give a few words. Sorry about that. I'll give a few words on behalf of VPAC. I have had time to think a lot about this particular question. I would echo the sentiments of my esteemed colleagues on the table by saying it is without question that the subject minister in such an instance should resign immediately. Last night, I saw someone share a few posts on social media that showed country after country. I think it was South Korea. The prime minister resigned. There were a number of countries where there were ferry disasters, and the subject minister or even the prime minister resigned or they were fired, right? So I think that goes without saying. Now, given the standing allegations that our president was at a World Cup football game, which remain to be confirmed, because we have still not seen a single photo from that 24-hour period, right? But so it's alleged at the moment, and we're waiting on further confirmation. But given that our head of state was out and people in his own cabinet were not aware of it, then I think the circumstances change a little bit. And as the subject minister, first of all, there would not be 2 GDF helicopters that reportedly had their ground systems unit fried, sitting unserviceable in a hangar that could not make it to the site. I think the systems that should have been in place beforehand were not. To my knowledge, there's no regular testing of the life rafts, of the life jackets, so it was almost like a suicide mission. But what I would have wanted to see is a more immediate response, people being mobilized to the site. If the vessel had an AIS locator as it was supposed to have been, we would get more than an average of where it was and known directly where that asset was. People could have been mobilized. They have search and rescue helicopters that are working with Exxon. I believe those should have been requisitioned. ASL recently shut down their rotor services department within the last week. I'm made to understand they had an available helicopter. All they needed was temporary certification so they could have joined the search and rescue effort. Those people should have been mobilized to the scene right away. Rather than trying to limit how bad we look internationally, we should have reached out to our international counterparts. I'll echo Ms. Walton in saying this. Call out to Trinidad, Suriname, French Guyana to request any vessels or aircraft they had in the area that could join the search. And bright and early the next day, I would have expected to have divers on the scene. Again, no matter, we have diving schools in the Caribbean. We could have called for help, got the divers there. One of the most heartbreaking things that I've seen in the last few days is that bodies of babies, pregnant women, and so on are now popping up. And I really don't believe it had to be like that. I'm sure some people would have surfaced in that manner, but I maintain the belief that if we were able to get divers mobilized to the scene fast enough, we may have been able to retrieve some of those bodies in a more dignified fashion. I also expected that I called some of the parlors along the coast to try and figure out what our cold storage capacity was, and it was very disheartening to find that I could not find capacity for more than 31 or so dead bodies, and all mortuaries in this country don't have the facility to store partially decomposed persons. In Saudi, I believe it's around 15 people. So the next thing would have been to mobilize cold storage containers to the location so that when people are retrieved from the water, they can be cooled down and stored until their family members are able to identify them. They needed psychosocial services on site. They needed logistical arrangements to make sure they book out all the hotels in that area so people have free room on board. It was reprehensible that they sent some of those people back to their region with $100,000 and a plane ticket with the most mental anguish on their mind. I think there could have been much more humanity and much more humility when the minister came to speak, and often he did it with such arrogance that it's left many of us still very upset. But it was a disaster on top of a disaster, because I think the response to this disaster was just as disastrous as the disaster itself. And when those things are completed, you make sure you get the divers and you start retrieval of bodies and you figure out the cold storage and the psychosocial support and then the financial support, not compensation, just the support people need or to bring families in. Then you could start thinking about things like coordinating salvage crews, so we can make sure that at some point we have a salvage crew to come and float the vessel up and then take it for some sort of forensic investigation. I know when planes crash, divers go, they retrieve all the little fine bits of foam and wires and they reconstruct it in a hangar somewhere so that subsequent to forensic investigation, they can identify exactly what went wrong, and exactly how to prevent it happening again. And I think we need to get to that stage in Guyana where we do not just stop at outrage when these things happen, but we move beyond that and we come to this place where we decide this or this or this and this is never, ever, ever going to happen again in this country, and we see to it. That's all.
We take one final question from Kaito News.
Good morning. Anasta Williams, Kaito News. There has been a burning issue. A lot of persons will have been questioning the way in which the government has been handling Minister Edghill. And I recall at the first press conference, the Prime Minister basically said that to send him home, quote unquote, would be the president's call. So my question to the opposition is, what action will you be taking to Parliament? Has there been discussions for you to basically seek a motion of no confidence, or maybe a select committee, if no action is taken between now and the next reconvening of Parliament, to address the way the government has been dealing with Minister Edghill, seeking that this tragedy has occurred under his ministry?
Thank you for the question. From the point of view of Parliament, all of those options are on the table. We are in discussions in terms of a motion dealing with the issue. There's a video that is actually circulating about what the minister said in 2023 as it relates to the vessel. And is it then that he lied to Parliament at that point, or something happened after he made that statement? And so at this point, we're looking at all of the options as to which would be the best route to take as it relates to Parliament. Should it be a motion of no confidence? Should it be that he goes to the Privileges Committee on that particular matter? But we also understand how Parliament works. But we will make an attempt to put forward something to Parliament that he has to answer to what has happened. We have Parliament on Monday. There's also discussion on whether we should actually put a question without notice on the order paper to deal with this matter, because it is urgent and it is important, and for the Speaker to say it is not would be a tragedy in itself. So that is also on the table. So you will hear from us as to exactly what route we take come Monday in Parliament.
Yes, I also want to add the public can play a part of it. You can start a petition. And I probably would urge you to do that. You start a petition online, whatever it is, and then when it's completed, you can hand it in to your MP and ask them to lay it into Parliament on behalf of the people that you would like this particular individual who you no longer have confidence in. Even if you voted for him previously or not, you no longer have confidence in him, and we, the people who signed this petition, are asking him to be removed. So you can do that as well.
Okay, it has been 2 hours, just about that. No, not any further. And I would like to thank you. I would like to thank you for coming. I would like to sincerely thank everyone here that is on the panel, from VPAC, from FGM, from AFC, and of course, our WIN MPs for being here today. It shows our commitment to the people. I want to also sincerely thank Odessa Primus, the MP, who just put all of this together with the blessings of the Leader of the Opposition, because we recognize indeed that at this moment we should all be able to work together to deal with this national tragedy, and we shouldn't try to do it on our own or by ourselves. And so as we move forward, we've put on the table what it is that we expect moving forward from this government, but we also know that they are hardly likely to listen to us, and so it has to be some sort of pressure from the people and from our end as well. And so you will be hearing more from us on these matters. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for all those who tuned in on the social media and the members of the media who were on Zoom. Again, please continue to pray for the families that are going through this very trying moment. I cannot even perceive to think what it is that they are going through, because I am far removed from it and I can't sleep at night. So I don't know how they're dealing with this tragedy. So sincere condolences again, and please keep all of the families in your prayers. Thank you very much.